What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. With that being said, let's jump into a Thursday edition of Pistons Daily. So first things first, as always, our skill of the day. And I just want to talk about Tobias Harris' effect on the Pistons' overall efficiency. I know I've touched a lot on Tobias Harris' defense last year in the playoffs. I thought it was exceptional against Karl Anthony Towns, and I really hope to see that heading into this season. But another area of Tobias' game that I really did think was pretty solid last year was just his offensive game. I mean, his isolation scoring when the Pistons needed a bucket was very solid. And I know that he's not going to be a guy that takes over games, but I will say there were some games last year the Pistons don't win without Tobias Harris. And if you're just looking at overall his advanced stats, you can see that he did have a positive impact on the Pistons' efficiency. It wasn't anything insane or substantial, but it was enough where every single category across the board, the Pistons were more effective or more efficient when Tobias was on the floor. So overall effective field goal percentage, the Pistons were 2.1% more efficient when Tobias was on the floor, which was in the 85th percentile. At the rim, the Pistons increased their efficiency by 3% when Tobias was in the game, which was in the 83rd percentile for qualified forwards. Overall mid-range, the Pistons were 0.8% more efficient, which was in the 60th percentile. And then if you're looking at three-point numbers, the Pistons were 1.8% more efficient when Tobias Harris was on the floor. And my point here isn't saying that he's some unbelievable offensive player that's going to take this team to new levels and is going to be the reason that they're an Eastern Conference contender, but I do like the isolation skill that he can bring at age 33. I still think that he can help the Pistons when they need it on offense, because in the half court, they weren't great last year like we've talked about in previous episodes. So I do think that there's a lot of room for Tobias to help improve this offense overall. And until proven otherwise, I do think that Tobias will provide solid minutes this year, even if it is in a much more limited role than it was last year, because maybe Ron Holland takes some of those power forward minutes away from him. Obviously, they're going to want to get Ron some more run. He showed a ton of improvement over the summer, and so maybe we see him kind of creep into a 25 to 30 minute a night role. Tobias kind of steps back into that 25, 22 minute a night role where he still can be very effective and he can still have a positive impact on this team, but he's not going to be asked to do as much as he was last year as he gets a little bit older. And you can allow Ron Holland to kind of tap into his offensive game without forcing him into the starting lineup right away and kind of just forcing him out of his comfort zone, but allowing him to come off of the bench, kind of make those mistakes, have those growing pains while still progressing as a player. So I do think just overall, Tobias Harris is going to help this team win. He's going to help this young core develop like he did last year. They love him in Detroit. I'm glad that they brought him back. They didn't decide to trade him. He's on his final year, so he could still be a potential trade candidate at the deadline. But if he isn't traded, then I do see the Pistons probably re-signing him next year to a much cheaper deal than what he's on now. I think they signed him to a 2-year, $52 million deal. He's making around $26 million annually. Obviously, next year he'll be 34 going into the 2026-2027 season, and the Pistons will probably throw him a much smaller contract, like I said, if he's not traded at the deadline. But let me know in the comments your thoughts on Tobias Harris, if you think he can help this offensive development and help the young core kind of get to where we know they can be, or if you'd like to see the front office go in a different direction at the deadline or next offseason. But moving on to our next topic, and I thought this article was pretty interesting. I think this was from Grant Hughes. Yeah, Grant Hughes over at Bleacher Report just put out an article predicting every team's best player in 3 years, and this is not a surprise to anybody. Cade Cunningham is the Pistons representative for this list, and I just kind of wanted to read the reasoning behind it. So Hughes writes, Cade Cunningham's ascent has only just begun. Last year, the former number 1 pick arrived as an all-star, all-NBA third-teamer, and 7th place finisher in MVP voting as he led the Detroit Pistons to 44 wins, tied for the franchise highest total since 2008. Cunningham's development as a facilitator, three-point shooter, and foul merchant, which I think is a little odd, is odd wording, but continuing on, produced career highs of 26.1 points, 9.1 assists, 2.1 made triples, and 4.5 made free throws per game. The upcoming season will be the ball handling wings age 24 campaign. Why would any of these averages trend down as Cunningham heads into his prime? It's possible the progress of Detroit's other young pieces will allow Cunningham to throttle back his scoring, but even in that scenario, we should expect an uptick in assist rate and a decline in turnovers as Cunningham utilizes improved spacing and supplementary scoring around him. And, outside of calling him a foul merchant, which is just insane considering the first 3 years of Cade Cunningham's career, he couldn't get a foul call if his life depended on it. But last year, he was able to get to the line a decent amount more, which was very encouraging. But I think Hughes makes some pretty solid points in this article. Yeah, Cade might not increase his scoring to 29, 28, 30 points per game next year, but anywhere between 25 and 27 and 28 is where he will sit, hopefully on overall increased efficiency, and that will have a lot to do with, like Hughes said, with the young core kind of developing, some of these players kind of coming into their own more offensively, alleviating a little bit of the pressure off of Cade Cunningham's shoulder, and with that will come a decrease in turnovers and an increase in efficiency. But when you're looking at just every other team's best player in 3 years, there's a lot of guys who will be around 30, 31, 32, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like Nikola Jokic, like some of these premier players in the NBA. So I don't think that it's going to be a matter of whether or not Cade Cunningham's the best player on the Pistons, but rather is he one of the best players in the entire NBA? And again, like I mentioned, Giannis, SGA, Jokic, some of the top 3 players right now in this current NBA are getting a little bit older, and there's going to be some room for Cade Cunningham to creep up into that top 3, that top 5 as soon as maybe even next year. But again, we're going to have to see some improvement across the board. The efficiency has to improve, especially at the rim. The three-point shot came around last year. He shot around 35%, which I think was his highest clip of his career. But if he can get to be a 48, 49% shooter from the field, a 37, 38, 39% shooter from three, and still shoot 85% from the free throw line, I think he will be in conversations for one of the top 5, top 3 players in the entire league, and I'm pretty confident in that. But again, with the offensive production, predicted to increase for J.I., Ron, Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, the Pistons might not need to rely on Cade Cunningham as much to go get a bucket, and I think that will really help him cut down those turnovers. He's not going to be relied to have the ball in his hands as much, especially late in the shot clock when he's driving downhill. There was a lot of times where he was getting the ball knocked out of his hands because teams were just doubling him when he was making his move to the rim, and I think that will cut down with more Jaden Ivey drives, Asar Thompson having the ball in his hands a little bit more, maybe even Ron Holland becoming a secondary ball handler off of the bench. So there's just a lot to like with this young team, and I think all of the different skills that these young guys bring are going to help Cade Cunningham's development overall, and I really do think that he has room to creep up in the same conversations as Luka Doncic and Anthony Edwards and be a premier player in this league, be a consensus top 10, and you're looking at him as being a top 5, a perennial MVP candidate, and a guy who you see on the All-Star team and the All-NBA first team every single year. So very, very excited for Cade Cunningham's development. I'm glad that Grant Hughes made this article because it just shines the light on the fact that he is legit. He is a legit number 1 option in this league, and he has the potential to lead this team to a championship. So very, very excited about Cade Cunningham's future and glad that he was included in this list. But let me know in the comments down below what your expectations are for Cade this year and heading into the future. But I just also wanted to touch on the fact that Malik Beasley was reported by Robert Snell of the Detroit News to have paid his outstanding rent of $38,000 and has moved back into his downtown Detroit apartment. And I know I don't want to touch on the financial side or the legal side of things, but I just wanted to give you guys this information that he is now in good standing with his apartment complex and again is once again living in downtown Detroit. And it's all speculation, but I definitely think this is a good sign of things to come. He's living in Detroit where he wants to be, and he's getting his financial situation under control, because we've talked about this. At the end of the day, these guys are people, and they've got their own issues and they've got their own problems. So it's good to see that he's able to kind of reflect on that, and he's fixing those mistakes that he made in the past. And I really do hope that this investigation, nothing comes of it, and he can return to the Pistons, because there's a reason he's back in Detroit. There's a reason the Pistons have a roster spot open still. And I really do think that the Pistons are eager to kind of get this investigation past him so he can join the team, hopefully as soon as maybe December or January, and the Pistons can have him down the stretch and potentially into the playoffs. But again, just wanted to touch on this. I told you guys that I would give you information as soon as it comes out. And so that article was released today, that he is in good standing with his apartment complex. He's back in Detroit. And I do think that is a very good sign of things to come. But, again, we'll have to see. We'll continue to update you guys. And hopefully we get some good news here in the next couple of months. But last topic before we wrap up the show here is my favorite Pistons. My favorite Pistons that I was very, very high on when they came to the Pistons or when they were drafted. I've only got 2 guys listed here because I went into a little bit more depth than I would have liked talking about these guys, because I was really, really high on them, and I just wanted to touch on them. So again, this offseason we're in the dog days. We are in the absolute heart of the offseason. So it's been a struggle trying to figure out content. So I think I'm just going to start talking about old players, old teams, old coaches, and just my thoughts about what's happening outside of the Pistons organization, around the NBA, different storylines, different rankings lists and tier lists. So I think I'm going to start to do that more as we enter the season and get into training camp. And then obviously we'll get more into talking about the Pistons. But for today, I wanted again to touch on just some guys that I was high on for absolutely no reason. And the first guy is easy for me, and that's Brandon Jennings. I mean, in the 2.5 seasons he spent in Detroit, I was such a Brandon Jennings truther. It was unbelievable. I really thought he was going to be the point guard of the future. I mean, the buzzer beater that he hit against the Spurs just had to be one of my favorite moments as a Pistons fan. He steals the inbound pass. He goes down, gets to that left hand. And, just the way that he moved with the ball in his hands, he was so quick. He was so unbelievably athletic. And that shot and just that moment will always stick with me as a Pistons fan. But again, I really did think that at 24, I think he was 24 in the 2014 season, that he was going to be that guy. He was averaging around 15 points, 7 assists. He was showing the ability to be a great facilitator and a great scorer when you need him to be. And that it was going to be, I really thought that, he was that guy that was going to kind of take this team into the playoffs. At that point, I really had never seen the Pistons play in the playoffs in my life. So it was very, very fun to see a guy like Brandon Jennings in a smaller market like Detroit. At the time, Detroit's not necessarily a small market per se, but at that time, it was hard to get people to want to come to Detroit, and he embodied that, and he was just an unbelievable player. Obviously, he tore his Achilles, and that was absolutely heartbreaking. That was one of those injuries that I'll always remember, and it'll always give me PTSD. But he had such a bright future, never really got back to where he was early on in his career. But again, just what he brought to the Pistons, what he brought to my fandom just for 2.5 years was pretty fun, and I'll always remember that. So shout out Brandon Jennings. Let me know if you guys felt the same way about him. If you don't really remember his time on the Pistons because they were so bad. But I've been a lifelong fan, and I've watched these teams even when they're horrible. So it was really fun to see Brandon Jennings kind of bring this team back to a team that people were talking about and was getting a little bit of national media attention. And then another player, this one is going to give some heartburn to some Pistons fans, and that is Stanley Johnson. I don't know if you guys saw, for about 2 weeks, I had a Stanley Johnson poster right behind me. I was staying at my parents' at my hometown, my house I grew up in at my parents' place, and I still have my Stanley Johnson poster hanging up in my room. So that I had some comments about that, but I mean, I was so unbelievably high on that guy coming out of Arizona. And coming out of Mater Dei, whatever. when he was in high school, man, his Hoop mixtape, his Balls Life mixtape were just so unbelievable. I was a big basketball player myself, and so I love to watch those guys just absolutely tear it up, thinking maybe I could get there one day. Clearly, I couldn't. But when the Pistons passed on Justice Winslow, when the Pistons passed on Justice Winslow for Stanley Johnson, a lot of people were mad, and I was not. I was so excited. I had really become an Arizona fan in a bandwagon for his freshman year without even knowing that he would, go to the Pistons. But when they drafted him, man, I was on absolutely cloud nine. I thought he was the next Kawhi Leonard. I thought he had the skills to be an unbelievable two-way player. He was long, he was athletic, strong, and LeBron was giving him praise after the 2016 playoffs for his defensive ability and the way he was able to hang with LeBron. Obviously, he didn't stop him because they got swept, but he was still very solid in that series as a young player, and it was really looking like he would have a bright future, but as he went on in the league, man, his athleticism never really came to fruition. His jump shot was just atrocious, and it somehow got worse throughout his career. And then by 2018, he was shipped off to New Orleans, and fast forward to 2025, I don't think he's played in the league in 2-3 years now. So definitely a sad story. I mean, he's still doing well for himself. I think he's playing overseas right now, but a guy that I really thought was going to have a long career and somebody that was going to kind of take the Pistons to the next level. Clearly he didn't, and clearly I was a horrible player evaluator at 13 years old. So there's a reason I'm not in front offices right now and I'm making podcasts. But again, I mean, I really thought that Stanley Johnson was going to be that guy. But let me know in the comments if you guys also thought that Stanley Johnson and Brandon Jennings were going to be difference makers for this Pistons franchise. Or if there are any other specific former Pistons that you really liked or thought were going to pan out and just simply didn't. But that's really all I've got for you guys today on a Thursday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter over at Kyle Garrison 2. Also, head over to Spotify. Leave me a 5-star review if you can. I'd really appreciate it. And once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 57 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.